Risk and resilience. And I really appreciate everyone taking time to join us today. This is a public webinar for the Miami-Dade County Back Bay Coastal Storm Risk Management Feasibility Study. Before we get too far into the program, I wanted to turn it over to Katie Oswald in our office to talk through the interpretation and language options.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Translation is available in Spanish and Haitian Creole. To hear live translation of this meeting, please select the translation icon at the bottom of the screen and select your language of choice. I'd like to welcome our Spanish interpreter, Maria, to give the instructions in Spanish. Maria, can you go to the English one? Great. Great. And I'd like to welcome our Haitian Creole interpreter, Francie. Francie, can you give that instructions on the English channel, please? Okay, Christian.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, thanks so much. Some quick reminders for the webinar this evening. There's both a question and answer or Q&A box. So if you have a question throughout the webinar or at the end, please insert those questions into the Q&A box. If you have other general comments or ideas you want to share, you can put those in the chat. But we'll try to remind folks that all questions are going to be directed to the Q&A box so that the speakers can respond to them throughout. And a few other quick things. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to view this at a later date visiting the Army Corps of Engineers website. For attendees, your microphone is muted during this meeting. As I mentioned, you'll submit your questions in the Q&A chat, the Q&A box. The questions and comments will be addressed either during the presentation, if possible. Otherwise, we'll have questions at the end where you can raise your hand. So there's a raise hand feature, and at that time, at the end of the presentation, we can request that your microphone be unmuted and enabled so that you can speak. But you'll be able to insert questions through the Q&A or raise your hand at the end and share your comments. So today you'll be hearing from a few folks, both from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Norfolk District. Those folks are listed here: Abigail Preddy, Faraz Ahmed, and Justine Woodward. And from Miami-Dade County, both myself, Christian Camrath, and Nancy Jackson from our Office of Environmental Risk and Resilience. So just a run of show for today. After some welcoming remarks, we'll talk through the background of this initiative. We'll talk through phase one of this initiative and a review of that, as well as phase two, thinking about what's happening now and coming forward. And then we'll have time at the end for that question and answer session. So in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself, and in the questions, you'll add those. So with that, I'm going to transition and begin with a welcome video from Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. One moment. One second.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, and I want to thank you for joining tonight's public meeting on the Back Bay Coastal Storm Risk Management Study. This is a long-term multi-phase process, and your input is essential as we work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to develop solutions that reflect our community's priorities. I want to thank Colonel Sunny Avichal and the teams from the Norfolk and Jacksonville districts for their expertise and commitment to this work. Last year, we celebrated a major milestone with the 2024 Chiefs Report and its congressional authorization through the Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA. This marked real progress in protecting infrastructure, businesses, and homes from storm surge. While federal funding for the next phase hasn't yet been secured, we're actively advocating for it and continuing to move forward. On the bright side, we have seen continued funding for critical Everglades restoration, such as the Biscayne Bay Southeastern Everglades Ecosystem Restoration, or BBSEER project, and phase 2 of the study is underway, aiming for authorization in 2028. And we're laying the groundwork for nature-based solutions that protect both people and ecosystems. With sea level rise, king tides, and stronger storms already impacting us, the urgency couldn't be clearer. That's why we're committed to identifying alternative sources of funding and innovative community-driven solutions that build resilience and keep our neighborhoods safe. Thank you for being part of this important conversation and helping to build a future-ready Miami-Dade.
All right, and with that, I'm gonna share the slides again and turn it over to Ms. Michelle Hammer with the Army Corps of Engineers. Michelle?
Thank you, Christian. Good evening. My name is Michelle Hamer, and I am Chief of the Planning and Policy Branch at the Norfolk District. It is our honor to continue our partnership with Miami-Dade County and in support of the Jacksonville District. If you've been with us along this journey, much of what you will hear tonight may sound similar to what you've heard before, but it's just a great continuation of the work from the 2024 report. Tonight, as Christian mentioned, we will review what was recommended in the 2024 report and outline the path forward to a 2027 report. We'll walk through the opportunities to reduce risk, discuss our scope for the study, including formulation for non-structural measures such as floodproofing, critical facilities, and commercial structures, and elevating homes. We'll discuss developing a screening criteria for nature-based solutions. And lastly, we'll scope a more comprehensive study to evaluate potential larger structural measures. We'll discuss the new focus areas and how they relate to the 2024 study. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And with that, I'll pass it to Christian.
Thanks so much, Michelle. So we'll dive right in. I'm just going to give a little bit of background for anyone who may be joining us for the first time or wants a refresher. Um, here in Miami-Dade County, if you kind of take a view at where we live from the ocean side, you can see at the very top, which is to our west and north, is the Everglades. Of course, to our east is Biscayne Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. And underneath our feet of course, limestone and a water table that's also changing with sea level rise. So we really live in between these two water bodies, and we have what you see here on this map, the blue lines and arrows showing the canals that run throughout our county. And we know that we deal with different water challenges or flooding risks. So that includes coastal storm surge from hurricanes and tropical storms, rainfall or extreme rainfall that also causes flooding in low areas, um, as well as rising groundwater. So when the sea levels rise, as they have been and will continue to do, the water table and the groundwater also rises. So this means that we have um, risks coming at us from all sides. And really, when we think about what this Back Bay study initiative is all about, it's really just one of many different initiatives showing here on this sort of typical cross section of our county. You can see the various U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other initiatives that help us address different challenges. So we have things like the Beach Renourishment Program. That's part of an Army Corps of Engineers project, improving and maintaining the Miami Harbor navigation at our port. Um, Specific studies going on for the village of Key Biscayne. Other studies looking at the central and southern Florida canal system and the structures that are on those canals that help deal with interior flooding. And of course, our historic Everglades restoration and the various elements of that. And so really the Back Bay study is focused, as we've mentioned, on reducing risk or managing risk for storm surge. But it is integrated, and we're trying more and more to tie these initiatives together at the federal level with the things happening at the state, the regional, and of course the local level within your neighborhood. So whether it's our partnerships with South Florida Water Management District on the primary canals, our stormwater master plan and other parks and various improvements that we do, or looking at how we can improve our water quality and protect Biscayne Bay through initiatives like the Reasonable Assurance Plan, how we work with municipalities across the watershed is super important as well. So all these things aim to work together to build resilience for the community. And just to recap, what this opportunity and this initiative are about, like I said, are different ways to manage storm surge flooding and waves. So there's really kind of three ways that we do this and that the Army Corps helps us do this is by first adapting individual buildings or what we might call non-structural approach. So this helps reduce impacts during a flood by, elevating a home, elevating critical equipment like backup generators or important electrical equipment. Flood-proofing commercial buildings is another way, so that when the floods waters do rise, there's less of an impact. Um, Many in our community have talked about and expressed support for nature-based solutions. So of course, this helps reduce the amount of energy or impact of storm surge and waves. So everything from coral hybrid reefs offshore to reinforcing our dune system on the beaches to living shorelines, and of course, mangrove and wetland restoration can all contribute to this and is being looked at. And then thinking about longer term and even bigger picture, you can also consider structural measures, which really aim, to provide temporary protection during a major storm and help control and keep water out of places we don't want it. So this can be done with elevated berms, levees, or floodgates. So all on the table, but need to be looked at carefully. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Justine Woodward from the Army Corps of Engineers to talk through an overview of phase one of our initiative here. Justine.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian, and good evening, everyone. My name is Justine Woodward. I'm a biologist here at the Norfolk District, and I've been involved with this study for several years. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to just review some of the history of this feasibility study. For those of you who may be new to the conversation, this is a fully federally funded study. It was actually initiated in 2018 and at the time was slated to be completed within 3 years and for $3 million. So in those first couple of years, we worked alongside Miami-Dade County as the non-federal sponsor to develop excuse me, measures for managing coastal storm risk. And as Christian mentioned earlier, the water resource challenges facing Miami-Dade County are complex, but our feasibility study is really focusing on coastal storm risk. So as we worked in those first couple of years to develop management measures, we eventually released a tentatively selected plan back in 2020 out for public and stakeholder input. And as the study evolved, we found out that some of the larger structural measures that were proposed just weren't palatable. And we did not have much support for them. So the study actually paused temporarily and then was reinitiated in August of 2022, largely in response to a request the prior December from Mayor Cava to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works at the time, Mr. Michael Connor, requesting additional time and resources for the study. And so with the reinitiation in August 2022, the focus of the first 12 months was to develop an additional alternative in coordination with Miami-Dade County that supported the feasibility study objectives of managing coastal storm risk through implementing measures designed to reduce potential damages caused by coastal storms, including preventing loss of human life. So during that first year, we had multiple public engagements. We also hosted charrettes, and we really welcomed feedback from our stakeholders, from our municipalities, and from the public on that alternative. And so once Mr. Connor approved us to continue in August of 2023, we focused our efforts on targeting a chief's report for 2024. So you can see listed on the slide, there were really 3 elements that we included in the chief's report recommendations. And I did want to mention that typically a chief's report marks the conclusion of a feasibility study. In the particular case of this study, our study is continuing, but the elements that we included in that 2024 Chiefs Report included what we referred to as actionable measures. That included residential elevations, floodproofing critical infrastructure, as well as floodproofing non-residential buildings. We also had 6 focus areas, primarily for where we wanted to really focus on the highest risk communities for the residential elevations. The 2 other elements of the 2024 Chiefs Report recommendations were the Nature-Based Solutions Pilot Program. And this was really an effort to request authorization for a program to look at nature-based solutions and to evaluate their effectiveness in terms of managing coastal storm surge risk. We also had a programmatic non-structural study authorization request as well in our chief's report. And so as Mayor Cava mentioned in her welcoming video, these elements were all authorized in the 2024 Water Resources Development Act. And currently, Congress has not appropriated funding yet to move forward. Next slide, please. So this essentially is a different way of capturing the information that I just shared for a civil work feasibility study. And once the feasibility study is completed, we move into pre-construction engineering and design, or the design phase, followed by the construction phase. And each of these can last on the order of years. And lastly, operations and maintenance. So what this is really highlighting for you all is that we did complete the feasibility study phase successfully, and we are waiting for appropriations, as I mentioned, both for the actionable measures in the 2024 report, as well as for the nature-based solution pilot program and the programmatic non-structural study. It's also important to note that although the Norfolk District is the lead on the feasibility studies, moving forward, the Army Corps of Engineers Jacksonville District will be taking the lead. And such an important part of the success of the 2024 study effort is really the input that we received from you all, from our stakeholders and municipalities. This really was a collaborative effort as we moved the 2024 study forward. Next slide. And so as we move into the 2027 study effort, and I'm going to get into the details of that here shortly, this just shows you again that we as the Norfolk District are the lead for the actionable measures. And we are in the process of working towards our next major milestone, the tentatively selected plan milestone that will occur early next year. And the Jacksonville District is taking the lead on scoping that comprehensive study framework, as well as furthering NBS. And so let's talk a little bit now about what the 2027 study effort looks like. So as Michelle mentioned as well in her opening remarks, we are going to continue investigating non-structural measures with our remaining funding for the study and over the next couple of years. So again, we are going to be looking at flood-proofing critical facilities, commercial structures, and residential elevations. Another element, as I mentioned, of this 2027 study effort is advancing nature-based solutions. So we are working with the county to develop screening criteria to evaluate future nature-based solution focused projects proposed in Miami-Dade County. And then lastly, the scoping of the future comprehensive study framework. So as I mentioned earlier, during that 2022 to 2023 time period, as we were developing an alternative to the previous tentatively selected plan, we developed a larger vision that included large structural measures for managing coastal storm risk in Miami-Dade County. Now, this effort would require substantially more funding and time than what we have for the current study effort. And so what this scoping of that future comprehensive study framework would involve, it would include developing a scope, a cost and a schedule for conducting that study. Again, that would look at larger structural solutions as part of that multiple lines of defense strategy that Miami-Dade County seeks to advance. In terms of our overall feasibility study process, we have completed scoping. We completed our scoping activities late last fall. And really at that time, we were looking for feedback on new focus areas for the 2027 study effort. And you're going to hear about that here shortly. So we are currently in our alternatives evaluation and analysis phase and working towards, as I mentioned earlier, a tentatively selected plan, which we anticipate will occur early next year in February of 2026. 60 days after that tentatively selected plan milestone, we will release our integrated draft feasibility report and environmental assessment to the public. So we will be welcoming your review and your comments on what is included in that report. And then we will move a little bit more into the analysis of the selected plan and refinements. And we are looking to complete our signed chiefs report in August of 2027 with a goal of the Water Resources Development Act of 2028. And now I'm going to turn it over to Faraz to talk a little bit about how we identify new focus areas for the 2027 study effort.
All right, thank you, Justine. Good evening, everyone. I'm Faraz Ahmed. I'm the planning lead on the study, and I will go over how we determine focus areas for this current effort. So part of the in-person public scoping meeting we held in November of 2024 was to get stakeholder feedback on how to determine focus areas for this next effort. One item we all agreed on was focusing on high frequency inundation areas for coastal storm surge. The Corps of Engineers finished a study in 2020 called the South Atlantic Coastal Study, and it covered all of Southeast U.S. And part of that was developing water levels along the Southeast coastline. So we looked at the 10% annual exceedance probability from that study. 10% AEP is also called the 10-year floodplain, and that means every year there is a 10% chance that a storm producing that amount of water level could occur. So our engineering team took that data, made inundation maps, and we used those extents as the main boundaries for the focus areas. We also looked at a 50-year period of analysis in our studies, and so we made an estimation as to when we think construction might be completed, and we add sea level change out to the year of 2095. And that's using the USACE high sea level change curve. And the focus areas also cover other items such as capital project synergy to take into account where the county and stakeholders may be pursuing capital projects. We looked at areas that represent current or future centers of economic development and include critical infrastructure. We looked at areas with lower recovery capacity, such as lower household incomes. And finally, areas with future nature-based solutions. So to have multiple lines of defense in the future, if we think there might be nature-based solutions in one area, we looked at focus areas to the west of it to have some kind of multiple lines of defense strategy. So all that information was used to develop the focus areas that you see on the map on the right. We have 11 focus areas that we'll be analyzing for this effort. As Justine mentioned, that's going to be areas where we'll look at non-structural, such as elevating homes and flood-proofing non-residential buildings, as well as looking at providing risk management solutions for critical infrastructure that service the focus area. The next 4 slides are zoomed-in versions of the map. So this here, we have our central area, which covers Miami River. The hashed areas on the map are the focus areas from 2024, and the solid colored areas are the new focus areas that we will be analyzing for this effort. So we have Miami River expansion east and west. So anytime we use the word expansion, we're describing that there was a focus area there in 2024, and now we're going either east or west of that one. And we have a new area in Edgewater. Next slide. Yep, and here we have our northern area. We have Morningside, we have Little River expansion east, we have Biscayne Canal expansion south, and 2 new areas in Normandy Isles and North Bay Village. And then the southern portion of the county, we have 2 new areas in Homestead and Florida City. We were down in Miami last week, and we actually had our in-person public meeting in Homestead. Again, these are 2 new areas that we didn't analyze before. And then last slide, we have Saga Bay focus area, which is also a new area. It's east of the Cutler Bay focus area that we looked at last time in 2024. So those are all the focus areas that we'll be analyzing for the 2027 effort. I think that's all. I'll be passing it back to Justine to cover the advancing nature-based solutions.
Thank you, Faraz. So we're going to talk a little bit now about advancing nature-based solutions and the effort in support of the 2027 study effort. We recognize how important nature-based solutions are to many of you, to many of the stakeholders. And so as we move forward, we are considering how nature-based solutions can effectively serve to mitigate some coastal storm risk. So the 2027 study effort is really a collaboration between Miami-Dade County and the Corps of Engineers to develop screening criteria that will be used to evaluate future nature-based solution projects in Miami-Dade County. This effort is being led by the Jacksonville District, and you can see what we've listed some of the major criteria listed on this slide. First of all, in terms of function and benefits, nature-based solutions should be focused on mitigating risk from coastal storms and storm surge. In terms of innovation, we will be considering the use of innovative methods, technology, and materials as part of one of the screening criteria. Also, implementation. We have to consider environmental compliance and the ability to secure permits as we work alongside resource agencies, as well as real estate requirements. Additionally, we must consider the acceptability to the general public and stakeholders of nature-based solutions. And lastly, the co-benefits of nature-based solutions. We know that there are a myriad of co-benefits, such as improving water quality, enhancing habitat, as well as potentially increasing recreational opportunities. So what we are doing currently is we are working on developing and refining the screening criteria, which does contain some metrics and methodology to allow a comparison of future proposed NBS projects. So the next steps is that this effort will culminate in a report that we will be including as an appendix when we release the draft integrated feasibility report and environmental assessment next spring. And next slide. Another ongoing effort currently underway is being led by the U.S. Engineer Research and Development Center, or ERDIC. And ERDIC's Coastal Hydraulics Laboratory is conducting this modeling effort with the overall objective of conducting a preliminary evaluation of the impacts between potential large-scale structural design alternatives on the hydrodynamics as well as some water quality parameters in the Miami-Dade County region. And so really the large structural measures that came out of our work done in 2022 and 2023. We have asked ERDIC to conduct some preliminary modeling to help us understand what are the potential impacts to Biscayne Bay and to the valuable resources that would happen as a result of this. So the overall goal of this modeling effort is to really help inform the future comprehensive study framework. Again, that will be scoping, developing a schedule and a cost estimate for that future comprehensive study that would look at large structural alternatives. So if that study were to occur, if and or when that study were to occur in the future, there would likely be additional modeling efforts. So this is really just kind of providing us with some information now to help inform that scope, schedule, and budget for the comprehensive framework study. And so currently the ERDIC team is working on that modeling effort. We do anticipate a technical report later this year, as well as future presentations on the progress. And we do anticipate at this time being able to include those results when we release the draft report next year. And I just actually, Christian, before I turn it back over to you, I did want to mention that we did just host an in-person public meeting in Homestead last week while the team was down there. And we do have the poster boards that were available during the public meeting, which is essentially the same information that you are seeing here tonight in this presentation, but we will have those available on the project website. And Christian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Justine. So as was mentioned, this presentation, those poster boards where you can see the more detailed maps of the focus areas being looked at, will all be available online through the Army Corps of Engineers website shown here, and we can put a link in the chat. So yeah, we really welcome you to stay tuned, right, for additional engagement opportunities. There'll probably be another round here in the next 6 months or so, certainly ahead of or coinciding with the release of the draft report for public comment, which, as was mentioned, is being anticipated in April of next year. But if you have any questions or want to talk with the county team or the Army Corps team, in the meantime, of course, you can always reach out to us. There's these email addresses to the right here, one for the Army Corps of Engineers team and one for the County Office of Environmental Risk and Resilience. So we really appreciate your support and collaboration, and this is a long haul, this effort and our work together. So we really appreciate the feedback and support to shape this initiative going forward. So with that, I think we will be transitioning over to question and answer portion. So we can go ahead and pull up some of those to see if there's any initial questions that we want to have answered. Okay. I see one in here. I'll go ahead and answer it live or read live. So given South Florida's porous limestone, groundwater emergence is a real and growing hazard, not just coastal surge. The study seems focused only on surge. Is the United States Army Corps of Engineers incorporating comprehensive flooding into plan formulation under WRDA 22, Section 8106 to maximize net benefits? And has or will Miami-Dade County submit a formal request to activate these sections A and B so that groundwater risks and water conservation can be fully considered? Maybe I'll let someone from the Corps respond, and then I can speak to that a little bit.
All right, hey everybody, can you all hear me okay? This is Abby. I'm the project manager at Norfolk District.
Yes.
So I just wanted to start with that response. The primary answer is no, we're not incorporating comprehensive flooding in this particular study phase. And what that really comes down to is we're navigating the reality of having non-infinite resources. So we have a limited study schedule and budget. And so because of that, we're primarily focusing on storm surge. I will say, however, I believe the intent and part of the focus of this ERDIC modeling we're doing is so that we can potentially look at comprehensive flooding and compound flooding in the future. So the goal is for that future comprehensive study to be more comprehensive, to look at structural measures, to look at the things that the current study effort wants to analyze and look at, but just doesn't have the resources to be able to do so. And I won't speak for the county, so maybe I'll see if Michelle wants to add on anything for the Army Corps side, and then Christian, I'll let you speak to the county side for that answer.
Abby, you did a great job. I have nothing to add at this time.
Thanks, Abby and Michelle. I would say no, the county hasn't formally requested that Section 8106 be looked at. We're well aware of the opportunity, and I think where we find ourselves today, with as Abby mentioned, there's a certain amount of funding. We have 100% federally funded for this feasibility study, and we want to maximize that available secured funding. And what you sort of heard earlier was talking about how a future comprehensive study and really the integration of this effort with other Army Corps of Engineers, but just other county initiatives in general, is how we're tackling comprehensive flood risk. So there's no silver bullet solution, and this study certainly isn't that, but it is one set of opportunities we can take advantage of. But I do think of course, looking ahead and going forward, the county's, taking a closer look at that and how we can leverage, various studies and initiatives to achieve that goal. So I appreciate that question. I'm looking at, I guess I know we wanted to see if there was anyone who had a raised hand or question that they wanted to ask live. And we'll, of course, get to the ones that are in the question and answer box. But Katie or anyone else, do we see any raised hands?
Yeah, so if anybody would like to answer a live or ask a live question, you can go ahead at the bottom of the screen and click the raised hand button, and then I can give you the permission to speak. And if not, we can go ahead and keep going through the oh, I've got one Beatrix. I'm gonna add you, and if you could unmute yourself, and if you'd like to show yourself, you can. You don't have to.
Well, I see there are a lot of studies. I would like to know, when is this going to take effect, meaning construction of all these things?
I don't know if the Army Corps wants to chime in. I can
take a stab at it, Christian. So it's a little bit of a best guess estimate because there's a lot of factors that go into it. But the study is currently scheduled to reach a Science Chiefs report. That's what marks the end of the study phase in 2027, late 2027. So if we assume a handful of years for receiving authorization, appropriations, negotiating the formal agreement to begin the design phase, we have to get through a portion of the design phase before we begin construction. And then that construction window is really dependent on how large of a recommendation, we walk away with from this study. So just to give some perspective, we had about 2,500 total buildings from the 2024 Chiefs report, and our construction window for that was 13 years from start to finish. So, the homes that are slated in that 2,500 number, some of them might be towards the beginning of that window, and some of them might be towards the end. It just depends. So it's hard to answer that question, but a rough estimate of when, the full project would be fully constructed most likely wouldn't occur until at least 2040 or later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice.
Right.
Any other raised hands?
Anybody else have any questions? If you want to raise your hand.
All right.
Okay.
We'll jump to the next one I see from John Wall in the Q&A. His question was about reinserting the structural alternatives into the conversation, and just pointing out that based on the fact that this option was a major hurdle last time, is there a reason to think this will receive a different reception now? So I really appreciate that question, John. I'll just say, what was really a big part of the pushback with the proposed walls and gates last time was where they were being proposed, right? They were being proposed for the mainland, kind of going along and across some of the major canals like the Miami River, Little River, and so forth. And there was a lot of potential conflicts there, not to mention the work that the South Florida Water Management District is doing on those canals to help deal with other types of flooding. And so really now that there's been over a year of brainstorming and community design input in the past, we're sort of taking some of those concepts that actually take those structural measures and potentially put them out closer to the barrier islands, right? To reinforce out by the inlets like Hollover Inlet, Government Cut, closer to Virginia Key and the Rickenbacker Causeway, and looking at potentially other ways to put some type of barrier, right, which would only be closed during a major storm, not a permanent closure of those inlets. So have gates out there that would potentially help keep water out. So that so far hasn't seen the same type of pushback, and it really is a huge undertaking to evaluate a system of gates like that. We are in regular conversation with other cities and other places in the country that are looking at this type of approach, and that's why, as Justine and other folks mentioned, we know that that's probably more than a $20 million study just to evaluate something like that, and we want to be able to do so fully with a comprehensive view. So that's they're doing that preliminary modeling now to inform the future scope, right? And so when that draft report comes out in April, if folks have specific things that they think should be looked at when considering those structural barriers or measures, please add that input in, because that's going to help shape the scope of that future study.
Christian, can I read one
Yeah.
question that was launched in the chat because I don't know how to
Sure.
answer it. It says, will you make depth grids available to download? And this is from Dennis Lambert.
I don't know if Army Corps folks want to take a
So I'll start and definitely defer to Robin and Faraz. Sorry, I can turn on my camera. Right now, we're working through that data, working through the water surface elevations. In general, I don't believe we provide a GIS link to the data that's available for public consumption. I don't know that historically we've provided those for download. They're usually what happens in a depth grid, it's very large and very difficult to download.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll go to another question from the Q&A. So Mitchell Austin asked, is this effort being coordinated with the South Florida Water Management District projects on the Snake Creek Canal and other similar projects? Uh, More or less, yes, Austin. I'm sorry, Mitchell. So the teams that work with the South Florida Water Management District are a lot of the same folks that work on this study in our office. And I know the resilience team with the South Florida Water Management District are closely following this effort, and we have discussions about potential, integration and complementary efforts. So absolutely, we have those conversations, and the Jacksonville district staff for the Army Corps are also part of those conversations too. So yeah, lots of regional projects going on, and we do our best to maintain that open line of communication for folks, but we're happy to follow up if you have specific questions. I see another question from Carol. Can you update us on the future South Florida Water Management District measures in the area, especially the C8 canal? Great question, Carol. It's not necessarily the focus of the study of the webinar tonight, and I would ultimately defer to the South Florida Water Management District. I know there's been ongoing conversations with the Village of Miami Shores and what's going on with that canal and the gate there. So I know it's an important high priority project, and I don't want to give really too much information that could be potentially out of date. So I would really happy to follow up and share their contact information if you want to reach out to the South Florida Water Management District to get that update. Okay, are there any other raised hands, or I don't think so. Otherwise, we'll continue in the question and answer box. So from Claudia, how is the Back Bay study coordinating with Everglades and Biscayne Bay restoration efforts to ensure alignment across interconnected ecosystems? That's a great question, Claudia. There's actually a separate team and effort within the Jacksonville district of the Army Corps of Engineers who are looking at what we kind of call that effort integration, right? How are the different Army Corps of Engineers studies supporting or complementing one another? And our office also functions to look at that. Really, sort of the example you heard earlier in the presentation was especially when we look in areas of South Miami-Dade, where there are Everglades restoration concepts or work that's ongoing. In some cases, those are, east or seaward of where some of our non-structural focus areas are for this study. So when we talk about multiple lines of defense, there may be multiple initiatives and multiple studies and agencies that are ultimately supporting projects that help improve the health and the resilience of our mangrove and wetland ecosystems in South Dade, while we're looking at elevating potential homes, near those same areas. And so there's ongoing coordination across these teams to help make sure those work well together as much as possible. But it's a good question. Thank you.
And Christian, I'll just add to that as well from the Army Corps perspective. We are certainly working with our counterparts at the Jacksonville district. We do meet regularly to discuss all of the different ongoing core efforts in the region as well. So that's, that's certainly, we're having those conversations.
Thanks, Justine. All right, I see another one from Raymond. Will there be opportunities for pilot projects or case studies, such as house lifting systems or self-closing barriers up to 15 feet of protection? Um, Raymond, if you have any information about existing or proven technologies or case studies that you think could be of use to the study team, we are certainly open to any information like that. I would say, I don't know if the Army Corps, you want to speak to the sort of idea itself. I think we talked about the nature-based solution pilot program, and I don't know if you want to say more about how the Army Corps like certifies different management measures or technologies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. So it's going to be very high level response, but I would say that certainly for design and construction, we're looking at using proven technologies and proven tested procedures for doing elevated. So it's a little less opportunity for maybe piloting different measures. We'll be using certified um, procedures for elevating structures, ones that have been used previously.
Thanks, Michelle. Um, okay. Another question from Claudia. What are the biggest barriers to scaling nature-based solutions across Miami-Dade? And how can residents and community organizations support their adoption in future phases? Um, Great question, Claudia. I'll maybe start and then see if others feel like adding, but you know, uh, it's challenging, right? One, there's a lot of environmental regulations which are, in place for good reason and um, just create potential conflicts and barriers, right, to implementing certain types of nature-based solutions. Um, and I think it's also, uh, I mean, it kind of depends when you say um, scaling nature-based solutions. We could be scaling smaller solutions across the county, or we could be taking smaller solutions and trying to scale them up into larger projects. And both have their challenges. But I think in terms of how residents and community organizations can support, obviously staying engaged with this effort and commenting and adding support as part of the draft report. Um, Advocating, to your congressional delegation and other folks who um, have potential say on appropriations for getting this type of work started, like with the nature-based solution pilot program. So speaking up and speaking out about what you do want to see. Um, and I mean, there are many other initiatives beyond just the back-based study that are looking at and trying to advance nature-based solutions, both to deal with stormwater and coastal flood risk. So engaging with those organizations that have a real focus on that work, and looking out for things that are related, like whether it's um, planning in our watershed or water quality improvements. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to share anything about the Biscayne Bay advisory boards and how folks can stay tuned into that type of work. But
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Yes, for sure. I would like to give a shout out to all the advocates who have been on this webinar and have been following along, and to the public, and to a lot of our great design and engineering professionals who are joining us tonight, because you all have been big advocates for nature-based solutions, and part of the reason why we were able to get as far as we have to get this pilot study and to have in the future the opportunity to implement nature-based solutions as part of this project, as Justine said, it was so important. It came through to the Army Corps how important it is to our community here. So obviously the advocacy works, being a part of it, and making your comments and making your voice heard. One venue for that, especially around water quality concerns, is the Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board, which is a multi-jurisdictional, cross-departmental county board that advises the mayor and makes recommendations to improve water quality. And I'll drop, or I might ask my colleague Katie to drop the link to our website into the chat so everybody can see it. And our next meeting is the beginning of October, but we take a public comment period at every meeting, and the advisory board members are very interested in hearing from the public on these topics. So thanks for shouting that out, Christian, because it is an excellent opportunity for folks to have their voices heard on this topic.
Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate the comments and things coming into the chat. I'll jump to the next question. So, has the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had any experience and success with implementing elevation measures such as raising homes and structures as part of past flood risk or coastal storm risk management projects? If so, can you provide examples where these efforts have been successful in terms of community participation and the long-term effectiveness or durability of the elevated structures? I'll point that to the Corps folks, and I saw there was a comment on that, Joanne Moore mentioning Miami Beach has funded residential elevation, including multi-unit buildings, and engaged in community outreach. But if Abby or others want to, or maybe Faraz.
Yeah. Hey, Christian. Yeah, so as part of the core, we have completed some smaller level elevations, but as far as the larger CSRM studies, we have several projects right now at the core that are in design and construction, totaling almost over 11,000 elevations. They're funded, but they are currently in design phase. So we don't have that information right now as what participation looks like or how community engagement looks like. But I think in the next few years, we'll have better information on what that looks like, and we'll be able to apply that to this study as well.
Thanks, Faraz. All right, I'm going to another one from Greg. Are the non-federal sponsors contemplating funding future phases of this project or portions thereof? So beyond the 2027 signed Chiefs report, would Miami-Dade County or other non-federal sponsor consider funding preliminary engineering and design, for example, for nature-based solution or structural solutions? Yeah, I can speak to that a little, Greg. So, as was mentioned before, this ongoing feasibility study is 100% federally funded. So, for future phases, for the, like you said, the design phase or certainly construction phase, that would be done at a cost share, a federal, non-federal cost share. And so, yeah, if we want to see any of these projects move forward to design phase or construction, Miami-Dade County is the official non-federal sponsor on this. But I think we'll also be looking for other funding opportunities and ways to help cover that non-federal cost share for these efforts. So, and I know in other cities and other studies that are like this, in some cases, the non-federal sponsor takes on, through different actions, takes on a little bit more of the design work and phase and does it in coordination and partnership with the Army Corps. So, we're having those conversations and trying to figure out, yeah, certainly a future funding strategy and a way to make sure we can advance projects that the community is in support of. Okay. Another question from Greg. How is Miami-Dade County or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers preparing to use data coming from the FDEP, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Florida Seafloor Mapping Initiative? My understanding is the current FSMI data collection will conclude early 2026, and USGS will process the data and make it publicly available in 2027. That's really great to hear, Greg. That sounds like a great data set being produced. I think others in Miami-Dade County probably are tracking this more closely. I'm not personally aware of it, but I think anyway, the seafloor mapping or bathymetry mapping, the underwater elevations, can all have a potential effect on storm surge. So I think, as studies get conducted and move along in their phases, of course, we would try to introduce and use the latest and greatest data that is available at the time, assuming there's time to incorporate it into the different phases of any future study. So um, I'll be looking out for that. I don't know if the Army Corps perspective, there's anything else you want to add to that, but
Yeah, Christian, I'll just add, for this 2027 study effort, I don't think the timeline, I don't know that that would necessarily be considered as part of this study effort. We also don't have anything proposed in water for the current project where that might also be relevant, but it could certainly be a data set that may be useful in the future if and or when the future comprehensive study framework occurs.
thanks, Justine. See another question from Carol. In Miami Shores, we are going to be installing living seawalls by Kind Designs at our Bayfront Park seawalls. Hope you will consider this as a structure made to act like nature. Um, I'll just respond real quick, Carol. Thanks for bringing that up. We know the Kind Designs team and the work that they do, and it's exciting to see the living seawalls being implemented and constructed in our county. We know there's some good and interesting benefits that come with that. I think just to kind of clarify the type of structures that I think this study is doing some preliminary modeling on are less about having a private seawall that goes along either one or a couple private properties or public properties. Um, I think the types of structures that the Army Corps and our team are thinking of would have to be substantially larger than what you see along like a typical canal or a typical shoreline, just to be able to withstand the force of major storm surge. So they sort of act a little differently. I know the living seawalls certainly have benefits for, potentially during high tides or smaller storm events. But in this case, the types of structures we'd be thinking of would be meant to help reduce flooding against, a much larger storm where you have storm surge of imagine 10 feet or more to help address that. So I would say in the future, if and when we did look at structural measures, absolutely would be trying to integrate where possible, multiple lines of defense and nature-based solutions as part of that concept. And I know there's some creative ways to maybe go about that, but we're in the very early phases of that. And looks like Merle has a question. I think this is pointing to you, Faraz, about what area of Miami Beach. I think they're referring to the focus areas. We can go back to the map if that's helpful. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, Faraz, or
Hey, Christian, I think there was another comment from Johan, I think, and I think they responded saying Bay Isles for private homes and multi-unit and so be.
yeah, I think so. I'll just I'll reshare the screen here. What you'll see is parts of Normandy Isle, like North Miami Beach here, but yeah, this is a lot of mostly North Miami Beach. Partly was included in the 2024 focus areas in the green hatched lines, the solid turquoise line that are for the 2027 or phase 2 study. And then just going back to the overall, Johan was right that, yeah, South Beach, kind of like the Flamingo Park neighborhood, is also highlighted here, but that information, and you can look at those maps on the Army Corps website for more detail. Any other questions or hands raised that folks have for us tonight? I'll just share a couple reminders as we wrap up for the evening. Of course, again, you can always reach out to Miami-Dade County and our Office of Environmental Risk and Resilience on the emails shown here, or the Army Corps of Engineers study team. And once we conclude this webinar, you will see an opportunity to fill out a feedback survey, and we really appreciate if you're taking a few moments to let us know what you thought of the webinar, what could we improve, and make sure that we're yeah, continually enhancing the experience for the public and doing what we can to improve our outreach for this effort. And again, all the materials and a recording will be made available in the coming days and weeks. So please look out for that and share it with others who may not have been able to attend tonight. And if there's no other questions, I'll just see if anyone from the Army Corps or others from our team want to share any final thoughts.
Christian, I just want to say again, thanks to everybody for spending the evening with us. We do appreciate this discussion and your continued support as we move forward with the 2027 report. Thanks, everyone.
All righty. Have a great night. And thank you so much to our interpreters,
Yes, thank
Maria
you.
and Francie. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks everyone for taking time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.